Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody.
Or no. Guys,
Like
guys, come on.
Hello. I know it's 6 o'clock. I know it's brutal. It's a brutal time to have a class. I totally understand. I feel like when I was in college and I was in classes, I was just reading the entire time. That was the only way I could like function. So I totally get it. Well, welcome. As Christine said, my name is Jaclyn Napoleon. So I'm the director of graduate admissions for the Rockefeller College. So as all of you assume know, based on your major, Rockefeller is your academic home here at UAlbany. And so I oversee all of the graduate admissions for the master's programs, the PhD programs, the graduate certificate programs for public administration, international affairs, political science, and criminal justice. So I'm sort of here in two parts today. One is to tell you a little bit about like graduate school, for those of you who might be thinking about grad school and maybe have questions or just sort of exploring your options or just like, I don't even know, where do I start? I'm happy to be a resource for all of those things. And then I'm also going to, of course, share with you a little bit about the programs we offer here at UAlbany. As some of you may know, you are among the top ranked programs in the country at the Rockefeller College. We are top 20 in the nation in public affairs. And that's saying a lot for a public university that, you know, as we all know, aren't the best funded university. So we do really, really well with what we have. And our faculty are incredible and our staff are incredible, as you know, working with Joan and Christina and Zahar, of whom you all need to get to know really well if you haven't already, in addition to knowing your faculty, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But what I want to start is sort of how students proceed. You've come to college, you've found a major, hopefully one that you like, one that you may decide to take you down the road many years. And so this is the graphic I like to illustrate for students what they can think of as they move forward. How can I intersect these things? How can I find something I really love that I'm passionate about? How can I find something that the world needs it? World needs a lot right now. They need all of you. And so what can you do that is contributing to the world? Can someone pay me to do that? Bonus. And you're really good at it. It's something you can use your skills to really go make an impact. And that's what we do within Rockefeller. It's what you do as political science majors, as public policy majors, as criminal justice majors. You are able to do really impactful work in these programs. And if you decide to go to graduate school, you just take that to the next level, whether that's law school, a professional degree, an academic program, a PhD eventually. These are the kinds of degrees that are out there. And so don't feel like there's only one path, because that's certainly not the case. I think a lot of times students, particularly in political science, some of you are like, well, I just have to go to law school because that's what political science students do. And law school is a great choice if you know you want to practice law, that you want to spend 3 years reading and writing intensively, spending a lot of money and a lot of time. Good for you. Lawyers are needed, lawyers are necessary. But there are a lot of other options besides law school. So I want students to make sure that your eyes are perhaps opened up to some other opportunities and alternatives to law school. Again, law school is a great choice if that's what you know you want to do, and that practicing law and doing all of the things that are entailed with being a lawyer, you know that's what you want, fantastic. But there are other avenues. Certainly one is a more traditional academic route for any of you considering just a straight MA, like a Master of Arts or a Master's of Science. Perhaps some of you are like, you know what, I've really discovered that I love research, that maybe one day that will bring me to academia or working for a think tank or working for an NGO and doing research, and that might be a PhD. Maybe you want to go all the way and really commit yourself to something specific within your field. And then finally, there's a professional or a terminal degree. And so I'm probably going to spend the most time on this kind of degree only because I think it's the degree that you may know the least about, and the one that I think is oftentimes the best choice. And not because I'm biased, but because it will set you up to do lots of different things. I sort of feel like a theoretical PhD is one sort of student, a law student is another sort of student, and then there's a professional degree student, which I think can come from a lot of different shapes, sizes, alternatives, majors, all of the things. And so there are a lot of different avenues you can take. And the great thing about a professional or terminal degree is that it's something that prepares you to then go do work in the field. So if you know, you're like, you know what, I do like theory and I do like research, but I really want to get hands dirty. You know, I want to get in there and I want to make change. I want to create, something really great, leave the world better than I found it. I ask students all the time how they want to change the world, and you can do that in any of these avenues. So I just encourage you to take a look and open your mind and think about what some of those opportunities might be. So lots of different things, law school, more traditional academic route, professional degree. We'll talk a little bit about all of these. But the good thing is that you still have time to think ahead to do these things, because you're here, you're experiencing your undergraduate degree. There are lots of things that you can do now to prepare yourself to make sure you're ready to go once graduate school happens. And so some of you are already doing this, things like visiting your career office. You all know Christina, you know Joan, you've done all of that already. You're doing internships. Those are some of the most important things you can do, because you are ideally doing something right now that's giving you a little bit of a taste test for what you might do one day. And so that is why internships are so valuable. Maybe it's not what you want. Maybe it's a little bit what you were not expecting on the other side. Wow, I don't love this. That's just as valuable an experience as a really great internship, because then it tells you what you want to do versus perhaps what you don't want to do. And so creating and having this really valuable internship experience there is nothing like it. So good for you guys. The other thing that I'm hoping your faculty have maybe shared with you, and if they haven't yet, and that I strongly encourage you to do, is to think about taking quantitative courses. Some of you are required to as part of your major, but likely not all of you. And so why we recommend doing quantitative courses is not because we want to like force you all to do calculus or something. It's really not about that. It's about learning how to analyze, how to use statistics to inform decisions, how to use elements of numbers, digging into them to help find whatever the solution might be. If you're interested in working in public policy and really making changes to things, if you're interested in doing anything that makes a decision, impacts budgets, you need to have evidence and data to support what your decision is. And so quantitative courses help prepare you with some of those really essential skills to learn how to analyze numbers. And maybe it's qualitative research that you're doing, and it's not going to be hard numbers, but it's still going to be using some of those similar characteristics of learning how to analyze outcomes. And so those are really important. And so you want to make sure that you're taking these quant courses if you haven't already. So for UAlbany, that's definitely PAD 316 and Rockefeller, definitely take 316. If you're interested in taking something like microeconomics, that tends to be a pretty valuable course. That's Math 110, I think. Sorry, Echo 110, not Math. You can take a regular statistics course too. That's perfectly fine in the math department. But the great thing about social sciences, which is where sort of we all fall within the college, is that all of these statistics courses are really taught from a social scientist perspective. So you're not doing, like I said, hard calculus, really hard statistical analysis using numbers that aren't related to a real world issue. And so that's what's great about stats from the social scientist standpoint. So really something I encourage you to take. Some of you likely are already involved in student organizations. Those experiences can be just as valuable as an internship sometimes, particularly if you're a leader within the organization, you've spearheaded a major event, you've taken on responsibilities to really make yourself stand out. Or perhaps you've just been a really good team player and really participated consistently throughout your time here. Those are all great things. I briefly alluded to earlier, the importance of getting to know your faculty. They truly become essential if you're thinking about going to graduate school. A letter of recommendation from a faculty member will go further than almost anything else that we see on an application to graduate school. Your grades are the most important. However, if there's a wonky grade or a grade that wasn't quite what you hoped for, and you have a faculty member who can talk about that grade or talk about that class and how hard you worked and how committed you were, and how even though you had that one tough course, this professor has taught you in other courses and knows what a strong student you are and can do well and can be successful in graduate school. That is why you get to know faculty, amongst other reasons, but that's one of the really great ones, is because they can become your biggest advocate as you're thinking about going to law school, to a professional master's degree, etc. So I highly recommend getting to know those faculty members, because they can really oftentimes become a mentor for you as you're exploring these kinds of options. For some of you, you may not need to worry about taking an exam, the GRE, the GMAT, or the LSAT. These are all of those entrance exams to graduate school, sort of like the SATs or ACTs perhaps you took in high school, although you guys might not have had to. But it is, it is a standardized test that some schools require depending on the program. So just something to keep in mind, particularly law schools, pretty much all will still require the LSAT. So those are the kinds of things you want to think about and be planning ahead for. And in choosing the right program is pretty essential, because at this point, part of it's kind of easy because you've been here for a little while, you've taken courses in your subject area. You're not necessarily a freshman who's like, I don't know what I want to major in, I'm overwhelmed, there's so many choices. You've probably honed it in a little bit this way at this point in your college career, that you know what you like. and perhaps what you don't like. And so think about what a program looks like for you. What do I want to be doing in graduate school? Do I want to be doing practically based problem solving type projects? Do I want to be doing a lot of research and theory? What am I interested in doing? And then talk to students here, talk to your professors, talk to students at other schools, if there are places you know you're gonna take a look at. Look at things like accreditation and job placements, think about their alumni, I know those things probably seem like, is accreditation, something like, what do I need to know about that? That's really the gold standard for how colleges are ranked and how they are looked at, like we are accredited by NASPO, which is sort of the gold standard of public affairs schools. Those things are important to be accredited. Job placements are really important, particularly for things like professional schools, law schools. I mean, you want to know that if you're spending this time, this money, this energy, that you're gonna have a job when you're done. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the context of Rockefeller. And connecting with alumni is really important. I know for me, if students are applying to the MPA or the MIA here at UAlbany and they want to talk to an alumni, I am always happy to connect them because those are the best ambassadors for our programs because they're out there doing it. They're actually working in the field. So don't be afraid to talk to people. If you know you're like, I love UAlbany, but I want to go to the West Coast, or I know I want to go back to the city. I'm looking at grad schools or law schools elsewhere. That's okay. Reach out to those places and talk to them and ask to be connected with alumni. Think about that location of where it is. I think one of the things sometimes students forget, you all know, because a lot of you are probably interning within state government, is that there is so much here in your backyard in this little city in Albany that I think a lot of people sort of forget what an incredible sort of starting place this can be for a career. Because the great thing about Albany, as you all know, is what a large seat of state government it is, how stuff really happens here every single day. And so even if you know, you're like, I love Albany and I maybe want to stay here for a little while, but not forever. It's really great for all of the choices, whether you want to stay, do your graduate degree, work here for 5 years and then relocate, or stay here and create a career here. I think Albany is one of those places where people can really find meaningful work in everything from public policy to nonprofit work to, you're interested in working in budgets, in health, in education. You're interested in international work, believe it or not, Albany has a lot of outlets for international work. So it really is a place that, take that second and third look as you're thinking about before you graduate. If it's a place that maybe it's a place I can stay, and if not, that's okay. Maybe you're thinking about New York or DC or Boston or another city. But it's not necessarily the make or break for most graduate schools, so you want to keep that in mind. And then you always want to ask about costs. I mean, like I said, you're already very brilliant for choosing a public university and spending, a reasonable amount of money on your education as opposed to, going into crazy debt. And I think that's one of the things I always encourage students to think about is it's not about the name of the school, it's about the degree that you did and what you did with that degree. And so for our students, Rockefeller students in particular who were, coming out of the MPA program, they're working alongside Ivy League students every day. They are, they are doing just as well. They are fully competitive in the marketplace. And I think those are things that are important because you don't want to come out after undergrad where maybe you have some debt and do that again in grad school, particularly for law school. That can be a really, really heavy burden. So those are the kinds of things you want to think about. And then as you're considering graduate school, as you're moving forward and you're thinking, oh gosh, I have to have straight A's. Oh boy, do I need these perfect test scores, all these kinds of things. You need to be a good, strong student for sure. I mean that, especially if you're coming right out of undergrad. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but if you're coming straight from undergrad, you want to do master's degree, that's the best information we have about you is your transcript, is the grades you have, the performance in your class. Yes, with your internships and your recommendations, those are all really, really valuable too. But in terms of how we know you can be successful in a graduate program, your grades are sort of the best indicator for us. So, if you have one poor grade, it's not going to end your chances, but you want to make sure consistency over time is incredibly important. I mentioned test scores, some schools don't require them, some do. You want to make sure you ask those questions. And then of course with work and internship experience. And I say work or internship experience because you're all doing internships, so you've already sort of checked that box off. But if you have, a part-time job at, Starbucks, or you work in the mall, or you are, taking care of a loved one on the side, those kinds of commitments are just as valuable as internships. You have to manage your time, you have to show up, someone's holding you accountable, your coworkers rely on you. You're learning all of those essential skills, even if it's not a job directly related to your major. So those things are really valuable. So if you're working and you feel like, I don't know, is my 15 hours a week at, Chili's, is that really, yes, that's valuable, that's great. Lord knows, especially if you're working in any kind of retail or customer service industry, you are learning really valuable skills. So those are all really good experiences to make sure you include as you're thinking about going to graduate school on your resume and all of those experiences. So before I sort of shift to programs themselves, are there questions about just sort of general graduate school at this point? Okay. So now I'm gonna talk about our graduate programs, because obviously those are the ones I know best, but I can certainly speak more generally about graduate programs. Certainly I'm familiar with a lot across our peer schools and across the Northeast and other parts of the country. So if you have questions, by all means. But so we have a really lovely selection in the college of, as I said, master's programs, PhD programs, graduate certificate programs. So most of you probably have a sense of what a master's degree is. It's typically a 1 to 2 year program. It's creating a very concentrated focus within your subject area. We also have graduate certificate programs, which are sort of valuable credentials in terms of they give you sort of a smaller credential and a specialty in an area. It's just not a full degree. So a graduate certificate is going to be about 15 credits, 5 courses. Sometimes it's really good for a student who just isn't sure a master's is what they want, but they know they may want to take credits with them one day. A certificate is great. Or if you're going to go out and find a job first, you know what, you're like, I'm just going to go find a job first. Maybe I'll take a course or two. The certificate's a good way to do that. And then of course, PhD programs, a little more of a long-term commitment. Typically, PhDs are anywhere from 4, 6, 8 years, depending on what you're committing to get that doctoral degree. But today we're going to talk a little bit about master's degrees, and then a little bit about some of the opportunities you have here at UAlbany, at least if you're not a senior, if you're a junior or a sophomore, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But more specifically, you're also probably like, all right, well, tell me a little bit more about what these degrees entail. And the reality is, as I mentioned, is how do you want to impact the world? What sort of a change agent do you want to be? Are you interested in working in government? And that could be in your local hometown, that could be on the state level, that could be on the federal level, that could be internationally. You know, we have alumni who work in international governments, we have students who work in nonprofit organizations, in everything from human rights to policy, to education, as I mentioned earlier, and healthcare, immigration, working with refugees. There are so many things that, while right now sometimes seem a little bit scary, all of these jobs are necessary and will be here. And so there are so many opportunities for you to be able to explore, particularly in New York State. I think we're lucky in some ways that we are, I think, are a little bit insulated from some of the crazy that's happened. Sorry, I apologize, I don't want to be so biased, but I just feel like it's really, some of the stuff is really scary in terms of federal, potential federal shutting down of funding for certain things and positions and certain things. So for those of you who are like, you know what, I'm gonna stay in New York and work in state government and make an impact on my state and try to really do well here, great. But you can also challenge yourself and, you know, work someplace else. It'll be an interesting experience, I'm sure. But I think what at the end of the day our students really want to do is to be advocates for others and to be able to create a healthcare system that works for people, to make education accessible. You know, to work with people who are coming to this country and helping them through that transition. There's so many different ways to do that. Additionally, there are ways to do that within the legal field without being a lawyer. So we have a lot of students who've gone from the MPA, particularly the MIA, the Masters of Public Administration, or the Masters of International Affairs, and have gone to work for legal organizations, but they're not lawyers, and they're still able to work in that field and do some really effective policy work, analysis work, within that industry. So sort of something to keep in mind as well. And as I mentioned, it's all levels, all the way from local, all the way to federal, nonprofit organizations, non-government organizations. There are lots of organizations that keep the eye on the government to hopefully make sure they're doing what they need to do. So there's a lot of great opportunities to really make a difference. So very briefly, I won't go into super detail, but just to give you a sense of how the master's programs in particular are structured. You're gonna have, you know, sort of that core element courses. That's where you're gonna take some of those, you know, analysis type of courses. You're gonna learn the foundations of who are the stakeholders in organizations, how international organizations work if you're interested in that. How do nonprofit public entities work? Because essentially what these degrees are doing are preparing you to work for the public sector. So an MBA, as you might know, in business administration, people are going to go on and work maybe in the private sector, in an accounting firm, a finance firm, in investments. This is where we're training you to work in government, in nonprofits, in purchase, specifically in the public sector. So you are sort of serving the public good. And that's really what these degrees are focused on doing. So you're going to have a core course that's going to core courses that are gonna sort of help you learn all of that good stuff. And then within that, you'll hopefully find something that might really interest you, and that could be something like education policy or environmental policy, or you're interested in healthcare administration or information technology, you really wanna make information work for people. All of those things are things you can focus in within the degrees themselves. The international affairs degree can do things like international development, global governance, and diplomacy. So there's lots of different options. And then the MA in political science or criminal justice, those are a little bit more academic and theoretical. A lot of great electives, so you can really create for yourself the courses that most interest you in those, but they're less practical in terms of how their structure is. With the MPA and the MIA, we are teaching you a very specific skill set. You're gonna get real world experiences, you're gonna do a professional internship as part of those, and you're gonna do a lot of like group work where you're doing real live sort of case studies, you're actually taking real live problems and you're working to solve them and create solutions. And so there's a lot of really exciting sort of hands-on stuff within practical master's degrees. So a lot of things to consider for sure. But we have all the resources for you right here, like I said. So if you're interested in staying at UAlbany and doing these, awesome. If you're not, that's okay too. Feel free to reach out, ask questions. You know, I think very generally, I can certainly address some of those. We have a great graduate school here at UAlbany as well that can sort of help provide you with some additional resources. So the next thing I'll mention briefly is the combined degree program. So for any of you who are juniors or younger, you can absolutely apply to essentially accelerate your master's degree. So you can apply, if you're a junior, you can apply basically by about May 1st is what we recommend. And so what it'll allow you to do is actually take graduate courses next year if you're graduating on a traditional 4-year path. If you have a wonky 3-year or something different, we can talk about that. But you essentially accelerate your degree by at least a semester and sometimes a year. If you're doing one of the MAs, you can do it in 1 year, the master's degree. If you're doing the MPA or the MIA, it's about 1.5 years. And the reason is because you're doing that professional internship as part of your master's degree. So we sort of say 3 semesters instead of 4, make sure you can fit in your internship. And what it allows you to do is while you're here as an undergrad, taking up to 4 classes of graduate level work. So you're taking undergrad courses, you're taking grad courses, but you're not taking extra courses. Everything is double counting. So if you're taking like our master's level public management course, that's going to count toward an undergraduate requirement, whether it's an elective or within your major. You can kind of talk about that with your advisor. But it's a really great way to essentially get not only an accelerated graduate degree, but it also saves you a lot of money, because you actually get to take those courses at the undergraduate tuition rate as opposed to the graduate tuition rate. So some of you may or may not know, to take graduate classes at UAlbany is about twice the price of undergraduate courses. So you really save several $1,000s by taking graduate courses as an undergrad. So kind of a nice perk of that as well. But of course you do have to do a few things. You have to have at least a 3.2 GPA. And for the MPA and the MIA, because again, I talked about that quant piece, is that you do have to have taken 2 quantitative courses. And get at least a B in those courses too. So like I said, PhD 316, stats course, microeconomics course, even like a financial accounting course. I mean, pretty much anything that's using some of that statistical analysis and data analysis within numbers will serve. And at least 56 credits, which gets you to the end of sophomore year, but for most students, unless you're on a 3-year plan, I typically recommend holding off till you're a junior, just because that way you've got most of those, or at least you've started your upper division courses within your major, which I do think is pretty essential. So just quickly, sort of deadlines, things you want to think about if this is something that interests you, if you're a junior or sophomore. The MAs are pretty non-structured. You can apply to the MAs pretty much anytime for CJ or political science. We'll get you a decision sort of on a rolling basis. For the MPA and the MIA, it's a little bit more structured. In the spring, we say May 1st. To apply for the fall. If you're applying for the spring semester, it's December 1st. And then sort of your application checklist, pretty standard. But again, it's important, things like letters of recommendation, you want to make sure you ask for those ahead of time. So it's important if you're thinking maybe about this now, if you're a junior and you're like, oh, maybe I will apply for the combined degree, reach out to who you feel might give you a good recommendation now, so it gives them a couple of months to be able to get it to you. You wouldn't believe how many students just have these like dangling incomplete applications sitting out there because we're still waiting for a recommendation from someone. The student didn't reach out or didn't follow up. So important things to consider. One of the nice things is that your transcripts all live here because you're UAlbany students, so you don't have to worry about requesting a transcript and paying money or anything. That's already here, which is good. And then your resume, of course, with all that valuable stuff that you've done. any interesting courses you've taken, any volunteer work you've done, all that stuff. Christina and Joan are well versed in sharing all of that with you. And then your personal statement. And one thing I'll say about the personal statement, I won't spend a ton of time on it, but I will say don't stress about it. We're not looking for some like perfectly formulated statement of like, this is my life's goal to, have world peace. We want you to talk a little bit about what motivates you. Why do you want to go out and change the world? What are the ways you're interested in impacting things? What specific questions are interesting to you? What do you want to ask? What do you want to learn? So you don't have to know what your entire career looks like. It's more about just sort of the motivation for wanting to go to graduate school and create this new experience for yourself by learning, one or two things that you're really excited about. So if you're interested, if you're a senior, first of all, or you're just like, I think I'm gonna apply the regular way, I'm not necessarily gonna do the combined accelerated degree, you can certainly apply. For students applying in the fall, deadlines are here. We do consider students for funding on some levels with sort of the regular admission process. It's limited, but we do that. So if you're a senior and thinking about applying, we'll certainly consider you for funding. I recommend applying ASAP if you're thinking about coming this fall. And again, same requirements for the application itself. So sort of logistics, I don't want to go too in the weeds on that. I want to be able to give you a sense too about why these degrees are valuable and where they take our students. So there's a couple slides I think that are good examples of the places our students have worked, interned, taken on positions, and they really cover all areas from New York State to the national level like the US Department of State to major nonprofits like the Red Cross to everything from the New York City Mayor's office to, I mentioned earlier, our students who work in law, the Global Network for Public Interest Law. There's lots of opportunities across all the different public sector arenas. So there's so many things that you can do with these degrees that really will allow you to contribute meaningfully. And so these are sort of what some of the titles look like. I'm sure Joan and Christina talk a little bit about, there's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of like vagaries in these kinds of positions, because you're like, what does a budget analyst do? Well, that's, it's probably something that's actually really interesting, but they don't, it's not necessarily the sexiest sounding position. So I think it's good to have a sense, get to know some of the terminology, get to know what some of these positions look like. Some of you may be doing some types of fellowships or things that may give you a sense of like, oh, okay, I kind of know what that does. But if not, these are the kinds of things that our students are doing and the kinds of titles that they have. So we really are lucky to have an incredible array of alumni who are super, super impactful and really, really interested in helping sort of nurture that next generation of leaders. So like I said, by all means, reach out anytime. I'm happy to connect with alumni, and Joan would be happy to connect you because they're out there sort of doing it. And I think that that's a really valuable way to learn what that next step is going to be like. You probably met a whole bunch of them in your internships too, I'm sure, because they're scattered everywhere in state government and nonprofits in this area. So